real honor to be here. It was over 11 years ago, I was just looking at it, that I first met Keith Smith. It was well before I started Health Rosetta, and I was on this quest that, I kind of joke in my LinkedIn that I'm an archaeologist, because I had to dig really hard to find something that was working. And Keith and direct primary care were the first two things that I found that were actually working for the parties that matter the most, the patients and the clinicians. And that was an honor to be able to be the first national writer to write about Dr. Smith and Surgery Center Oklahoma and Forbes. And then that continued and, led me to the journey I'm on now. And Chris's talk is a good lead-in, where the legal cases are one dimension of something that I've seen in the last 12 months. There has been a big change. There is a real inflection point in the industry that gives me incredible, we already have a lot of results, but a real acceleration in that. And so I'm going to hit on some of that and take you back. And we got this kind of future theme here. And I really do believe this is a very unique time in all of our lives that we can go one direction or another. And we have a choice, and I like Rush. If you choose not to decide, you still made a choice. And the choice is staying with what we've got, which is not a great scenario, as you've heard. And what I'd like to do is take you back a few years. This was a really big aha moment day for me. I don't know if you remember March 9th, 2016, if you think about what might have been going on back then. And that was the morning that I woke up to the news that Bernie and Trump had won the Michigan primary. I was like, wow, that's not expected. What's going on here? And when I really understood what was happening there, it made perfect sense. When you have the working middle class of America, the majority of households in America in a 30-year-long economic depression, right? That's far longer than a Great Depression. That is far longer than 1930s Germany, because, one definition of an economic depression is 2 or more years of wage stagnation or decline. Because of healthcare, you had the majority of American households in a 30-year-long economic depression. There was going to be some crazy stuff that was going to happen. Doesn't make it right, but it makes it understandable. And I realized that we've unwittingly let our communities be colonized by Wall Street. But we have a choice. And I'm going to give an example of somebody who started at square one 5 years later, whole different story, where we can be liberated. And so let's get in and talk a little bit about that. But I want to set up, I like to focus on the positive, but there's this book that came out recently that was very interesting, written by a physician, talking about how we have a situation where essentially medicine has been used as a tool of colonization. Basically, he goes through how there's incredible wealth extraction that has happened out of our community by distant parties that are essentially crushing the American dream and whatnot. And he talks about the definition of colonialism. And I'll just read it. Colonialism is the process by which one conquers another's territory to extract the resources of that territory. What if medicine, instead of gunboats, was the tool being used to extract resources? Very compelling question. This visual here is one that I'm not a competent at all graphic artist, but I used ChatGPT to come up with this image that is something I've talked about, which is every community, every year, has a river of healthcare money that flows through it. Often the headwaters of that river of healthcare money is the community itself. But unfortunately, much of that river of money is diverted to Wall Street and its water carriers. And when it should be more like a water cycle. After all, what is more local than an interaction between a patient and a doctor? This is what is happening to our communities. And if you look at a typical town of 10,000 people, that town spends about $140 million on healthcare. At least a third of that is extracted out of the local economy. Those are dollars that are not available for public safety, education, lower taxes, recreation, whatever that community does. And a typical community that size has about a $40 million budget for that town or city. And that's about roughly the amount that's extracted out of the local economy. If you look at the county I live in, the community I live in, about 250,000 people. So if you take per capita U.S. spending, we're spending a little over $3 billion, all in across all ages. At least $1 billion is extracted out of our local economy for, again, a fundamentally local service. And even if we only repatriated 10% of that, there are a lot of challenges in our community that would benefit from those resources. And there's clearly a much higher and better use of that. So what I want to do is talk about how we reclaim health sovereignty in this era of sort of healthcare colonialism. But again, we'll start with a little bit of the cold, hard reality of where we sit in our healthcare system today and the collateral damage that has been inflicted on our communities. And this is a community in Northeast Ohio called Ashtabula. And they are in this transformation from what I'd call colonized to liberated. And I remember, some of you may remember 20, 30 years ago, there were a lot of headlines, in quotes, ones like this, from George Will. There's more healthcare than steel in GM's vehicle price. Every vehicle had about a $2,000 premium put onto it. Rather than address the root cause of that, they said the solution is just, devastate the Midwest manufacturing base and manufacturing base throughout. And Ashtabula is one of those counties that was really hurt. A lot of automobile industry manufacturing going on there. And some of these data points are from a community health needs assessment that's from Ashtabula. A lot of the barriers you can imagine in terms of poverty, lack of education. You look at about a third of the households live, a third of the youth live in households that are below the federal poverty level. About a third of the residents spend greater than about a third of their household income on housing costs. That's way too much. And you have almost 2/3 of students on free or reduced lunch and very low achievement in terms of post-secondary education. Again, not surprising given the broader landscape and social determinants. And on the medical front, a medical desert, less than 30% per capita docs in that community. And lots of problems as a consequence of that. But now we get to the good part of this. And there's a gentleman named Bryce Heinbach who's here with us. He's going to be in a breakout later. And, he was square one about 5 years ago. And he didn't know this stuff, but he wanted to do it. He's a good person. And it just felt awful as a benefits broker to go into your clients every year and say, great news, guys, you're going to pay more and get less. And that's been the story of health benefits in America for the last 20, 30 years. And he learned about, from a TPA actually, about my TED Talk and about my book. Hey, take a look at this. He joined the movement, and stepped his toe in the water. Like literally the first thing that he did with a client was a single employer, 38 lives. Not exactly, some, monster scenario, but it shows how something that small, and you see some of the steps he did in terms of implementing high performance health plans, direct primary care, direct contracts. The story that Marty McCary was talking about earlier of that community pharmacist that's been devastated by one of the big pharmacies, that's not happening there. After the community pharmacists picked their jaw off the floor, when Bryce called and said, hey, we'd like you to be the center of the pharmacy part of our plan. And it was incredible, and it's really helping out that pharmacist greatly. And today, you fast forward, you've got over 5,000 citizens who have access to basically a world-class health plan, and the medical desert is starting to be addressed. And you look at the benefits. These are world-class health benefits for folks. There's no need to have cost sharing for members if you're not squandering dollars. Unlimited, concierge style, concierge medicine for the masses. Some people call it direct primary care for the whole family. You have these concierge nurse navigators, incredible part of the system, and in terms of how they establish trust before the moment of truth, and how important that is in educating, folks. As was mentioned earlier, the average person doesn't really know much about the healthcare system and all the confusing things, and that's really by design by the system. But it continues to be an incredible impact on the local community, and there's no reason. And you see some pictures here. This was a community that had no DPC docs. Bryce grabbed this. I think this is a picture of that physician. He was a very burnt out, dissatisfied fee-for-service primary care doc that had retired. He hated to be a cog in the machine. And Bryce went to him, just handshake, and said, "Hey, would you come out of retirement if I would give you some employer lives?" And sure enough, he did, came into that, was able to practice medicine the way he was trained. Now there's 3 DPC practices in that community. And you see the picture of Casey Millington, who's the nurse who's leading their concierge nurse navigator program. She's going to places where you talk about medical deserts. This lumber mill in West Virginia, there's definitely no doctors there. There's not even a grocery store within an hour's drive. And these are people who, frankly, like the majority of Americans, regular Americans, they're terrified of our healthcare system, not because of the doctors or nurses, but because of financial toxicity. Pretty much if you enter the healthcare system, it guarantees financial ruin when you have tens of millions of lives that they're functionally uninsured because their life savings are less than their deductible. We've changed that equation. They have changed that equation, and these people have unaddressed health issues, and they can start to address them. And as you know, many of you who are clinicians, people will tell you things they might not even tell their spouse about what's going on, but you can start to turn the tide, and it makes a huge difference. If you look for a while, they're a one hospital town. They've got a enormous health system that owns the local hospital. They're a very well marketed big health system, and they're world class in a few areas at their flagship facility, but they charge like they're world class for everything. And I wouldn't send my worst enemy to some of their facilities in terms of the rates of complications, not to mention the financial complications of being ruined. Today, 100 million Americans are in debt to the healthcare system. They're acting like that's not enough. Like we need 200 million Americans in debt. That is a crazy number. And so for a while, they, in some of the plans, it was out, like they work with a local school district. It was outside of the collective bargaining agreement, so they couldn't really change the plan. They could just add new things onto the plan. And so they would say, hey, if you go to the sorts of organizations many of you are working in, world-class facilities, low complication rates, fair, transparent, bundled price, you're going to pay zero. Well, you may not be a healthcare wonk. You can understand zero, and if they believe the numbers and then the trust that's been established allows them to do that, look at the data, say, but we're going to need to put you in a car, and it may need an hour or two. But to be prevented from going into medical bankruptcy, let alone, as was mentioned earlier, preventable medical mistakes are leading cause of death every day. There's 10,000 serious and preventable medical complications. That's a great gift. And that facility, Crystal Clinic, incredible outcomes. Now they've opened a facility starting to address some of that medical desert because they've gotten so much business in that area. It made sense for them. And then if you take it from an economic development perspective, this is a different lens on it. If you think about economic development 1.0 is just, you're a port city, you're on some transportation hub, it's just luck. for the most part. Economic development 2.0 is, put a veneer on your community, market it, maybe throw some tax breaks to attract or retain employers. Well, economic development 3.0 is you could throw all the tax breaks in the book at a company. That would pale in comparison. If you're a high value community like Ashtabula is becoming, look at the impact. Millions of dollars circulating. The school district, this is a school district only has 330 staff, not a huge budget there. I think it's about $5 million plus that they spend. Since they put in this plan, they've already saved $10 million. And early on, this was really pivotal because this is the 8th poorest county in the state and school district by extension to that. And despite that, they generally would pass their school levies, but unfortunately, school levy failed. But fortunately, in even the 10, 11 months the plan had been in place, they'd saved more money in healthcare than the entire school levy. Boy, that drove word of mouth in that community. But you got net wage gains for the first time in decades, and the impact is very, very significant, and it's really making a difference there. And then what we call the Health Rosetta dividend, which is what we've defined from the get-go. If you go back to before we launched Health Rosetta, my TED Talk, I highlighted Rosen Hotels. In the TED Talk, healthcare stole the American dream. Here's how we could take it back. They've cumulatively saved over $540 million in the 30 years they've done it, which easily then allows you to do the sort of things they do. Not only amazing health benefits for their employees, but to provide free entire college education for their employees' kids, and the nearby once crime-ridden neighborhood. And you see some of these other dividends, which is, this is what happens. And it's one of the things that we've learned. There's a few things actually we've learned on this journey that most people don't understand. One of them is healthcare's fixed. Like, we have all the fixes. They're in this room, right? We know how to do it. We know great primary care. We know great high-quality surgery. We know great drug procurement. That's number one. Number two, healthcare is not expensive. Like, what I think of healthcare is what clinicians do, right? What doctors, nurses, PTs do. Clinicians only get 27 cents of every dollar, right? We don't need 73 cents of overhead. If we get rid of that stuff, right, that's what's expensive: profiteering, price gouging, administrative bloat, fraud, and some inappropriate treatment. And we just choose to minimize or eliminate that, and you got plenty of dollars. And once you get out of that related to the Health Rosetta dividend, we're already investing more than enough money to not only fund a world-class healthcare system, but to fund or restore funding to what drives 80% of health outcomes, which are things like income, education, living in a safe neighborhood, these sorts of things. And that, what Rosen did, was always been very inspirational. And this is one of the things that's always a little puzzling for people, employers or unions, when we're like making these plans, like, hey, what's your plan for your Health Rosetta dividend? When we launched this plan, they're like, geez, I was just hoping to get a less sucky increase. Like, no, you really need a plan. There's real dollars there, and you should be intentional about what you do with that. And so, very high level, these are the steps that we see organizations and individuals take. Spells out this acrostic. And this is how we transform health plans, sadly, being the number one driver of debt, poverty, and bankruptcy, to being the top driver of well-being. And it's a 5-step process. 4 of the 5 steps, by the way, are either invisible to the member or clear positive. Number one, just a mindset shift. If you think healthcare is solvable, you're right. Join the party. Number 2, the O, optimized plan infrastructure. This is this boring stuff. Has made me incredibly excited to be like a cheerleader for the legal profession. Never thought I'd do that. We dive into the legal contracts. Like, that's probably the single most unique thing. In fact, it's been our biggest investment other than our own people, is the health plan documents. Every dysfunction you've ever thought of in healthcare if you understand the root cause. It goes back to these legal documents, the provider contracts, the vendor agreements, and then depending on the category of payment and the employer space are called plan documents. Every dysfunction is written into those contracts in detail. You have to fundamentally rewrite that's what we've done. And then you get into that. One of the things that we're open sourcing now, and Chris Deacon's played a big role in this, is this has been our secret sauce. This is why the worst result that happens when you implement a Health Rosetta plan has been a 20% absolute reduction in spending while benefits improve, is because we sweat the details of these contracts. And one of the lowest hanging fruit is work with a good PBM. They do exist. And be much smarter about that. And even before you change the formulary and you pick up medication in the right places, you can get savings because the shenanigans are so extreme there. Then you got to work with the great primary care. That's the first thing members have to notice, but in a good way. As Chris mentioned, is it primary care if it takes you months to get in? That doesn't sound like primary care to me. Primary care to me is when you can get in right away. And it's not some state secret that there's no well-functioning healthcare system in the world not built on proper primary care. And then the last step, a lot of what we talk about here, it's the highest, it's the one you have to be most thoughtful on. And so a lot of times we want to build that momentum and success. It doesn't have to go in this order, but this is typically what we see be the most successful. And then something that we have done is we've created the first objective mark of value on basically what's 20% of the U.S. economy. And you can just pick up just about anything on your desktop and get 1,000 reviews on Amazon. Here we have, huge chunk of our economy. So we got to score these plans. Everything else is scored in healthcare, and this is the value extraction device. And it's informed by multiple years of experience. We didn't even automate it, just put it in a gnarly Excel spreadsheet and proved it out. Could we actually find out something that's different? There's 40 questions, there's 100 rules in the rules engine that basically are the abstraction of what's in those contracts or in these 40 questions. And if you have a plan that is low, you're going to have high volatility, bad outcomes. Most status quo plans, when we score them, they get between a 5 and a 17 out of 100. You don't have to be a healthcare wonk to know that's not a passing grade. And if you look at successful efforts, whether it's new product category introductions or social movements, it's about resetting expectations. We can do a lot better. And we have these annual awards that we do. We call them the Rosies, that are the best health plans in America. And those employers have health plans that aren't 5 or 10% better. They're 10x better, and they should be rewarded for that. And I'd take you back to this image, back about 100 years ago of New York City. You can see one automobile. This is a time when things changed a lot slower than what they change now. But take a look at this next photo 10 years later. Where's the horse? That was 100 years ago. So it gives you hope, right? And this is where we're seeing this acceleration of what's happening here. And that's what again, coming back to this, we've had a very dark period. I like this quote from St. Catherine. Out of darkness is born the light. You are the light. You're the ones who can change things if you choose. And everybody in this room has a role to play in that. We need all of it. We can't do it alone. Certainly Health Rosetta can't do it alone. FMMA can't do it alone. Nobody can, but together. And I always say, there's the only thing more powerful than the healthcare system is all of us. And it is in our power to liberate our communities. And I think of it as, walking the talk. Join us to reclaim that health sovereignty that is there for the taking. And I love to remind my clinician friends that in many cases, they have been too passive and too quiet. The 3 most trusted professions in America: nurses, doctors, pharmacists. use your hard-earned trust. Yes, Bryce is not a exception. He's used that, and certainly there'll be people like Bryce. But I think the most potent weapon in this is people in our community. Chris spoke to that on the legislative community, but every clinician in this room has neighbors. They've got people they go to church with. They've got, patients who are civic leaders, business leaders that they can influence. Use that. As you saw with Bryce went, if you go year by year, if I remember the numbers right, it went from, I think, 38 to 535. We measure things in employee lives to about 1,342. It slowed down. He was building out some infrastructure. We had this thing called COVID that happened. And then about 3,600, now over 5,000, and it continues to grow. So it shows how quickly committed people can make change. So with that, I thank you. We have a breakout that's going to happen. It's going to drill down on this a little bit. Also, if you love FMA, we think of them our kind of sister or brother. You'll love coming to Rosetta Fest, where employers, clinicians, the solutions, a lot of the civic leaders come together. Easy date to remember, September 11th in Washington, D.C. Hope you join us. We have some of our books in the booth. And again, I'm incredibly grateful to all the work that Jay and Keith have done and the whole FMMA family. It's a real honor to be here, and thank you again.